Have you ever caught yourself performing a version of you that isn't quite true? Not lying exactly, just editing, smoothing the edges before anyone can see them, showing the parts that get approval and quietly burying the rest, again and again, until it feels automatic. You do it at work, with your family, in rooms where the stakes seem small. You probably did it minutes before you clicked on this video. And here's the question that should unsettle you. If you stripped away every performance, every mask, every carefully managed impression, would you even recognize what's left standing? Would you know that person? Or would it feel like meeting a stranger wearing your face? Most people never ask this. They're too busy managing the next impression to notice how far they've drifted from themselves. This video is about that distance and what it's quietly costing you. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from this. Not the tiredness of hard work, but the tiredness of maintenance, of holding a face in place hour after hour. Freud was clear on this. The ego is not master in its own house. You've spent years managing an image, and somewhere along the way you mistook that management for identity itself. The mask started as protection, something that once kept you safe. Now, it's the only thing people ever see. And you're the one paying for it. In fatigue that sleep doesn't touch. In a hollowness you can't quite name. In relationships that feel slightly rehearsed, even when you love the people in them. So ask yourself honestly, who actually benefits when you perform instead of exist? Not you. Never you. But we'll come back to that question. First, we need to understand where this mask actually comes from. Because it isn't random, and it isn't recent. Freud gave us a map for this. And the map starts with repression. Not forgetting, repression. The mind doesn't erase what it can't tolerate. It buries it, alive in a place you can't easily reach without effort. Everything you learned was unacceptable to feel. Anger, need, desire, envy. Didn't disappear when you pushed it down. It went underground, waiting. And what you show the world now is the surface. The ego's compromise between what you actually feel and what feels safe enough to reveal. Think about how often you've smiled through something that actually hurt, or said "I'm fine" as a reflex before you'd even checked. That's not simple politeness. That's the machinery of defense running quietly, automatically, every single day of your life. Freud put it plainly. Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive. And they don't stay buried quietly. They come out sideways, in irritability you can't explain. In a body that tenses for reasons your conscious mind refuses to name. This is the part most people never examine. Not because they can't, but because looking costs something real. It's easier to manage the performance endlessly than to ask what the performance has been protecting you from all along. That question sits underneath almost everything you do, unspoken, unexamined, quietly running the show, and avoiding it doesn't make it disappear. It only makes the distance between you and yourself a little wider each year. Now we need to talk about who taught you this, because you didn't invent the mask alone. It was shaped, reinforced, rewarded by people and systems around you. Someone, somewhere, made it clear that the real reaction was too much, too emotional, too inconvenient, too honest for the room you were standing in. Maybe a parent who couldn't hold your anger. Maybe a culture that turned vulnerability into a weakness to be managed rather than met. Freud would call this the pressure of civilization itself, the demand that instinct bend to what's acceptable to others. It's not a single villain you can point to and blame. It's 1,000 small transactions where you learned that being loved and being true were, apparently, two entirely different projects. And so you split. Public self, private self. The performer, and whatever waits quietly backstage. Unseen. Here's the uncomfortable part. You didn't just receive this pattern passively. You practiced it, day after day, until it became fluent. Every time the real reaction rose up and you swallowed it for approval, you reinforced the split a little more. But fluency in performance is not the same thing as peace, no matter how convincing it looks from the outside. And when you stop reacting to that old demand for approval, something in the system shifts. It suddenly has nothing left to work with. So let's be precise about the solution, because it isn't what most people assume it to be. This isn't about being real in some vague, performative way either. It's not about oversharing or dropping every boundary or mistaking rawness for authenticity itself. Freud's work was never about performing honesty for an audience. It was about making the unconscious conscious, quietly, for yourself first. Not to display it, to finally know it. Concretely, this looks like small, deliberate acts repeated over time. Notice the exact moment you're about to say, "I'm fine," and pause before the words leave your mouth entirely. Ask yourself, once a day, what you're actually feeling underneath the managed response and write down even one honest sentence. Notice which relationships demand the mask most heavily and get curious, without judgment, about why that is. Let one person, just one, see an unedited reaction this week. Irritation, sadness, uncertainty, without immediately smoothing it over for their comfort. Freud never promised comfort here. He promised something sturdier instead. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. If you're doing this kind of internal work seriously, this channel exists exactly for that slow, unglamorous excavation. Expect resistance from yourself first, before anyone else notices anything has changed. The old defenses don't retire quietly. They'll tell you this is dangerous, selfish, simply too much to risk. Some people who only ever met your mask will pull back when they meet what's underneath it. That's not failure on your part. That's just information, and it's worth sitting with rather than fleeing from. Because on the other side of this is something quieter than triumph and far more durable. First comes discomfort, the strange vertigo of not knowing exactly who you are without the performance running. Then comes a kind of silence, the constant noise of managing finally switched off. Then, slowly, clarity arrives. Not a new mask, just less static between you and the person underneath. You stop being a reaction to what others needed you to be, and you start being something that was simply allowed to exist on its own terms. Not louder, not more impressive, just less divided than before. Tell me in the comments, are you ready to know what's underneath the mask? And if you are, write this: "I'm done performing." Because what we're covering in the next video goes even deeper than this. Keep watching. It matters more than you think.